out my heart and soul, babe. You're feasting on my better side.
Hello and welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I tried smoking meat once. The lighter wouldn't take.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Motel Hell, released in 1980, written by Robert and Stephen Charles Jaffe, and directed by Kevin Connor. Ian, why don't you give us the synopsis for Motel Hell?
Well, the story follows Vincent and Ida. Vincent, played by Rory Calhoun, runs a motel on the outskirts of a small town. And every now and again, he likes to take in visitors that he captures on the road. The visitors he buries in his garden and then smokes their meat to sell to the local populace. But when a young girl, Terry, turns up at his doorstep, Vincent might just become a little distracted.
Well, Granny never put any distinctions on any of God's creatures. She always used to say,
Meat's meat and man's gotta eat.
So the original screenplay for this was intended to be a lot darker, a lot more crude and more violent, and probably with more nudity.
Okay.
And Tobe Hooper and Universal Studios were the ones that were the first up to take on this project. Although apparently Universal Studios looked at the script again and went, wait a minute, this is actually way too bizarre, way too intense, and way too dark, so we're going to pass on it.
Yeah.
And it was United Artists, I believe, that ended up taking the project. And they ended up asking Kevin Connor to have a look at it, and he was like, yeah, this is way too dark. I'm not going to attach myself to this project unless you lighten the tone of this. And I think that the writers were just like, if we ever want to get this made, we're going to have to lighten it up so that we can get this director. And I remember this director from films such as The Land That Time Forgot back in 1974. Yeah. He also did At the Earth's Core in 1976. In his first horror film, the From Beyond the Grave back in 74. And it was that one that he shown the writers to say, this is what I can do. And they were like, okay, you're our man for Motel Hell.
Yeah. I have always been a big fan of Warlords of Atlantis.
Nice.
By this director. And I saw it when I was a kid, and then I had to buy it. And whenever I see it on, I'm like, I have to watch Warlords from Atlantis because they're just it's such a weird, quirky movie. And I had one perspective, I suppose, of Motel Hell as I was going into it. Was that it was going 80s. It was about a brother and sister running a motel who smoke and kill human people for their flesh, and then sells the flesh to the local populace. And I didn't think it was going to be very good. I honestly thought it was just going to be silly. And then I noticed when I was researching it, it's got this satirical kind of look towards movies like Psycho and Texas Chainsaw. And weirdly enough, when you mentioned Tobe Hooper just then, I thought, oh my God, imagine if they just let Tobe Hooper go with what he wanted to do in this original Motel Hell idea of a brother and sister running this place. It would have been, like super, super dark. There's moments in this film that I was like, oh wow, that's like really good horror, 101 right there. And then the very next moment there was like a joke. Or, I don't know, an unintentional joke that made me go, that's funny, but it kind of changes my mood that I was just in on this movie. So I was all over the place for this movie.
Well, that's what horror comedies have to try to balance really well.
Yeah.
And that's why some of them are really hit or miss when they overdo the horror or overdo the comedy. Like, tonally, these films can really work, but it's got to be precision.
Yeah. Rory Calhoun, I mean, from his list of filmography that I looked up on, he had a massive range. He had so many movies. The one that jumped out to me was Night of the Lepus.
Yeah, of course.
So I was like, well, he was in that Giant Rabbit movie. He's got to be really good. And just seeing him sat on the little wooden chair over the credit sequence, just quiet, contemplating life, in the moment. And I'm like, he's a massive serial killer.
You got all that just from him just...
Oh man, if they sit quietly outside their motel, you know they got blood on their hands. And like, then he goes in and he sees his sister Ida, played by Nancy Parsons, and she's asleep on the bed with her thumb in her mouth, listening to this televangelist preacher. You know, I believe I might have missed it while watching the film, but the preacher is played by Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman Jack.
Wolfman Jack. Sorry, yes, Wolfman Jack.
I'm talking in tongues. I'm just so happy for you.
He's called Wolfman Jack. I don't know what else you'd say to that kind of stuff.
He's not my everyday watching anyway.
No. But we see Rory head out, and he's under the disguise of duck hunting. He's out at night, I think he is duck hunting. It just happens to be coincidental that those people are coming along.
Right? I was like, this is straight away. The film is just like, here's the coincidence where, like, going into the film, you know he's a cannibal.
Yes.
And he's obviously out there hunting his fresh prey.
Yes.
And then these two are coming along, and I'm just expecting him to shoot one of them or to take out the bike. But they have an accident right in front of him.
So they did. He didn't shoot the bike.
There is a loud bang.
Right.
But you don't see him shoot. So I was just like, it must have been... He either did shoot, and the film is hiding this from us.
Yeah.
Or the bike did actually have an accident here.
See, I thought I missed it, but I didn't rewind it because I was like, oh no, Ian, you're being silly. Like, you'll check it later. And I thought, oh yeah, they actually the tire just blew out.
Right.
And they crash, and he picks up Bo, the male, and Terry, played by Nina Axelrod. And Terry is only partially hurt. Like, she's groaning and moaning on the floor. And Vincent, like, the film doesn't fully tell you that Vincent's taken by her, I suppose. But he does seem to want to look after her more than anybody else he comes across in the movie. And he sticks her in her van, which maybe it's just present day thought process, but I'm like, man, you really shouldn't move somebody.
Yeah, I know. When you see him carrying her into the motel, I was just like, she could have had broken bones, broken neck, broken back, and you're just like, yeah, we'll just run her in the bed. Yeah. She'll be all right in the morning. Oh my god! And it is like the next morning when she comes around, you know, she panics that there's don't know where she is. She's like, where's Bo? Where's my fiance? Where is he? I'm like, oh, I buried him already. It's like, right, get the cops here now.
Yeah.
Like, this is not right. And like, he takes them to the cemetery or this graveyard, and he's like, yep, buried him here. And the cop's like, well, the law states in this county that you can bury them if, you know.
See, now that was the weird thing, because the Sheriff Bruce, is related to Vincent and Ida.
He's the younger brother. But you wouldn't have thought it, would you? Until they mention it.
And that's the funny thing, because I had to remind myself halfway through the movie that Ida is Vincent's sister.
Yes.
Like, I immediately, as soon as the movie started, I was like, oh yeah, that's his wife. It's kind of creepy that she lies in bed with her teddy bears and things like that, and he's attacking people at night. But they're cannibals. But Nancy Parsons, I'd only really seen her in Porky's.
Yeah.
Where she was playing like the evil character in that. And she played it really well.
She was also in one episode of Star Trek The Next Generation, season 3.
Oh, okay. That's season 3 though, I mean.
That was the good season.
Is it?
Yeah.
But her portrayal as Ida in this was really, really quite well. Where Vincent's the older, more calculating kind of killer, she's having fun with it.
Right.
She really does enjoy what they do, you know, and we come to find out that, yeah, Vincent has been selling this meat to the local town of Greenville, which I'm guessing Bruce must live in. And you never find out anything about the parents.
No.
Which kind of does freak me out a little bit. They do mention an auntie at one point where the auntie taught them everything they knew about smoking meat. And Vincent one day decided to smoke her dog.
Right.
One day she asked me to shush it for her. I shushed it all right.
He smoked that old dog just like a hog.
That night, Vincent served it for dinner. And Granny liked it so much, she nearly ate the whole pooch herself.
and then was it the grandmother who completely devoured it?
Yeah, and she was just like, "Oh, this is the greatest meat ever. You know, meat is meat, and we've got to eat." And I was like, "Yeah, I kind of like that." But Vincent, you know, he helps Terry, and then Terry stays at the hotel.
Right, I was like, does she not have any family that want to come and find her? Does the guy who died not have any family that want to come and find out what happened to him? Doesn't she want to go back home?
Yeah.
But she's quite more than happy to stay at Motel Hello.
Yeah, because she's kind of taken by Vincent. Vincent, you know, Rory Calhoun is really quite smooth. You know, he's a bit of a ladies' man, and you get the feeling like Ida really doesn't come across as wanting to get rid of Terry, but she doesn't like her.
She's interrupting, you know, their lifestyle right now. She could get in the way, or she could find out what they're secretly up to.
Yeah, because immediately in my mind, like, Terry is just a massive liability. Even the brother, who's a sheriff, doesn't know what these two are up to, and the sheriff is infatuated with Terry himself. But one of the best moments, I thought, in the whole of the movie was when Vincent, and with Ida as well, goes to his garden.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
You have I don't know if it's an animal rights guy who turned up at the beginning.
Yeah,
and
Bob.
he comes in
Bob.
snooping around, and he finds their secret garden, and you just see all of these moving sacks.
Yeah.
You know, in like the flower bed, or in this patch, and he takes off one of the sacks and realizes that there's people being buried
Up to their neck.
up to their necks, and it looks like they've had their vocal cords removed, so all they can do is gargle.
Yeah.
They can't call out for help, and you're just like, what are they? Why has he planted humans in the ground? Is he growing them to harvest them later because he's a farmer?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really make too much sense at this point. But then, yeah, he gets knocked out and then also gets buried in the patch as well. But we also cut to, is it Ivan and the Terribles?
Yeah, the band,
these stoner
the rock
rockers
band,
in the band
yeah.
driving along. They're smoking. They're listening to music. And but they're one of the first out loud laugh moments I had.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, oh, we need to find somewhere to crash.
Oh yeah, so did I.
They
know.
go around the corner, boom, right into the bear traps, crashes the van, and of course Vincent's right there to just cart them all out and escort all of them to his patch as well.
Yeah, because I was a bit freaked out by this point as well, because they were really incapacitated, and what the film doesn't tell you is that they are injecting them with some kind of knockout drug as well.
Yes.
To keep them
Completely pacify them.
Yeah, to keep incapacitate them for a couple of hours, because then he's got to dig the holes, and then Ida comes along and helps him drop the bodies in and buries them up to their neck.
He's got the great big drill that he uses, and Ida's the one who's cutting their throats open.
And it's like they've got a female there that he leaves in the ground. He doesn't bother to take back to the hotel, and it's the same when he comes across the two ladies. We have this great moment between Vincent and Ida where Vincent explains, like, he really likes using the traps.
It's the hunt. It's the thrill of the hunt, and so he likes to have lots of different setups.
Yeah.
And so for these two, he's put loads of fake cows on the road.
Yeah.
So that he knows that they're going to have to get out of the car to go and move them, in case they decide not to just plow right through them anyway.
Well, it is a quite fun moment. Like, this is your atypical 80s horror where, like, the two girls are arguing in the car about which one of them goes out to move them. And one of them gets out. When I Wikipedia'd the movie, I'm pretty sure these two girls were former Playboy playmates of years 78 and 79. I haven't checked that out myself, but they are very attractive.
Yeah.
And one of them gets out of the car, and she's grabbed by Vincent
and drugged out straight away.
Yeah, and her friend is just
panics and hits the gas. But we also cut because Terry is now on a date with the police officer.
Yeah.
He's taken them to a drive-in theater where they're watching The Monster That Changed the World from 1957.
Yeah.
And we already know that this guy's slightly off. I mean, he's a part of this family, right? So we know he's going to be slightly off. And he plays the move, arm over the shoulder.
Yeah.
And then he starts groping her and she slaps him away. Like, no, none of that, please. And so then he tries to rape her.
He properly, yeah. And I was like, okay, Vincent's nothing like this. But we hear over the policeman's radio the girl being chased by Vincent in his car. And so they decide, Terry and the sheriff decide to jump in get in the car and chase after to find out where this girl is. And the movie, for me, kind of threw me all over the place. Like that moment where he took Terry into the field, I was like, this is where they take all the abandoned cars.
Right.
But it's not. It's a bunch of teenagers all wanting to have sex.
It's Lover's Lane, essentially, isn't it?
But that was the joke. And so the sheriff scares them all off. And so you get this joke. And then you get the two girls in the car. So the horror fiend comes back in. And then the rapey sequence happened, which I was like, I don't know how to get that. And then it's now this action chase sequence where Vincent is trying to ram this poor girl off the road, while Bruce and Terry are trying to find their location in wherever they are in the local area. But Vincent takes... Like, I thought the girl died. Because we see Vincent knocking this car into the local river. But when you look at the garden later, you actually see the blonde girl in there.
Yeah. So he somehow managed to fish her out. Probably before he drove the car into the lake.
Somehow, but the film doesn't show you that.
Well, we do find out that he is an expert swimmer.
Yes.
Because Ida, at this point, is sick and tired of Terry. And it's like, I'm going to show you how we do all of the farming stuff. And then she tries to hide the fact that there's limbs floating in this bubbling stew.
Yeah.
She's like, you know what? This is a good time for tubing.
That'll be nice. What a day for tubing.
Tubing?
Oh, woo!
So they go tubing, which is essentially jumping into the lake with the big, rubber tube.
I'm glad Terry was wearing the white t-shirt and not Ida. I'm sure Ida is very attractive in a swimsuit, but Terry pulls it off better. And this was such a whole weird bit, because I was like, yeah, okay, Terry's a liability, so Ida kind of wants to take her out. And I'm guessing this will cause conflict with I'm guessing it will cause conflict with Vincent, because Vincent fancies Terry. But Ida pulls out this razor blade, and I'm thinking, oh shit, she's going to cut her up or something. She's going to cut her rubber ring. But she cuts her own, pretends to drown, and then when Terry comes to rescue her, she tries to drown Terry, which I'm like, Terry, just swim away. just go somewhere else from don't stay in the one position. And then out of nowhere, Vincent just appears in the river. And he's just leapt in from the edge, grabs hold of Terry, and he swims back. And they play it off like it was all an accident.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ida's like sincerely apologetic. She's like, I couldn't swim and I panicked and I'm so sorry. Will you ever forgive me?
But that's the thing. By this point in the movie, I'm like, okay, Terry, I'm guessing, is the innocent, but she's madly in love with Vincent and has given up on everything else.
Now, that is the major problem with this character.
Yeah.
Like, she's had this horrible accident to begin with, and her boyfriend, fiance, or whatever, was buried overnight. Like, she's got no questions about that.
No.
Like, the fact that she doesn't want to leave, the fact that, like, all of these weird things are going on around her, and she's like, I'm quite happy here. And then she's completely smitten with Vincent, and she was almost raped the night before, but she's like, yeah, it's fine, I had a really good night, thank you.
Yeah.
She's like, what is wrong with you, girl?
Why are you still here? Everybody who Vincent comes into contact with dies, other than you or a family member, like the swingers.
I was just about to say, don't forget, we got the swinger party
God.
that turns up. We get these two lost fools that are trying to find the swinger hotel.
Yeah.
And they've obviously got lost and they've ended up here.
You know what? I thought Ida had actually put the advert out
Possibly.
to lure more people in.
It's a possibility, yeah. And so we get this, like, the weird sequence when they're trying to get a room. Then we get this bizarre sequence where he's completely dressed up.
Oh, the whip sequence I was loving. She's whipping the whole entire set to pieces. And then he comes out of the bathroom.
Asking for the jelly.
I didn't know what to say.
I didn't know where the hell this was going.
Yeah, like...
There's people out there right now.
Edie, where's my jelly?
And so then Ida and Vincent turn up and they're just like, woohoo, swinger party commence.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, but we've brought the laughing gas. But this is different laughing gas to what you're familiar with. And they gas him out. And just as they're about to gas her, he's like, oh yeah, We gas you and we do the laughing.
Ah.
And then they get buried in the patch.
Yeah. I was just like, sometimes the tone of the movie was lost, but the jokes were good enough.
Hit and miss, I'd say. Hit and miss.
Good enough for me that I laughed to see what was in store next. And after because they'd broken the necks of a couple of the band members to drag them out so that they could start cutting up the
Don't
flesh.
forget, though, they give them one hell of a psychedelic LSD trip just to prepare them, because he's like, I am a humane farmer.
Yes.
I treat my cattle better than most other farmers ever have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make sure that they're completely pieced out before we yank them and break their necks.
And it works. I mean, it works. I do love the guy with the mustache who plays Hammy from Toy Story. He's also in Cheers. He didn't have much of a talking part in this movie, but just watching him lying there dead, like with his tongue out. And they're preparing these bodies. Now, they need the time to do it, so they drug Terry. Because Terry desperately wants to have sex with Vincent. But Vincent's like, no, we can't until we're married. And so she's like, okay, let's get married tomorrow. And he's like, okay. And Wolfman Jack, the priest, tells Bruce, the sheriff, look, your brother's getting married tomorrow. I love that little moment as well, where it's like, is that a pornographic magazine there? Yes, well, let me just take that so I can destroy it. And he takes the magazine, but then he starts looking at it himself. I'm like, we know. But Bruce is all like, oh my God, I've got to go rescue Terry because she doesn't know that Vincent's got syphilis on the brain. And Terry, Ida, and Vincent are all sat there having a drink, discussing about the marriage the next day. And you can blatantly see Ida pour this green shit into a glass.
Right.
And hand it to Terry. And Terry's like, oh, glug, glug, glug. And it starts to take an effect. And she gets knocked out. Now, I thought they were going to kill her at this point. But I only assume that they've decided...
planned to do it so that they could get to work on the farm.
Yeah. So they're wanting to keep Terry around, but also wanting to hide the farm stuff. Because the swimming sequence caused no conflict between Vincent and Ida.
No.
He's like, nope, that's fine. You tried to kill her. Okay.
But Vincent explains at one point that he wants to teach her the ways of the farm, but in his own time.
Right.
But because of the way the events play out, well, he doesn't get a chance to.
But why, Vincent? I get no love from you. I don't really get any aspect of you loving Terry. I don't understand why Terry would love you after everything she's been through. Yes, the hidden garden and the secret meat smoking process is a brilliant aspect. We should really just stick with that. And so Bruce turns up at the house to rescue Terry. And while he's rescuing Terry, explaining to her that they need to get out of there, after they've taken the 3 bodies out of the garden, the soil's been loosened, and Beau, Terry's boyfriend, starts to escape and help the other people escape. And they emerge like some crazed zombie horde.
Exactly. I was just like, why are they acting like zombies? Now, granted, the only thing that should be wrong with them is the fact that they can't talk. But why do they all act so brain dead? Is it because they've been in the farm for a few days being force-fed whatever chemicals or food they've been fed?
I couldn't, when they were in the garden, I couldn't tell if they were playing sound to the plants, I suppose, or if it was the audio of the movie just being creepy.
Yeah.
But like you said, after being force-fed drugs or weird psychedelic music and stuff, they're just gargling messes as they come out. And Vincent and Ida have been preparing the meat, getting it ready to make more shipments. And Ida's really, really hungry, so she goes off and finding Bruce. She beats Bruce up,
right?
And she steals Terry to take to Vincent to say, "Hey, look, she was going to escape, and we need to get rid of her." And Vincent's like, kind of upset.
Yeah, because he's just like, well, you've played my hand now. Now I guess I'll have to show you everything, and don't freak out.
Yeah, because I may have to potentially kill you later. Why you didn't kill her at the start. I think I would have preferred her to die and somebody to have come into the hotel
To find out,
looking for
yeah,
them
yeah.
than to have been somebody who was just
It
there.
would make more sense because her character is just a bloody mystery.
Yeah. Because Ida disappears as well, and she's attacked by the zombie horde.
Right.
And Bo infiltrates the smoking shed to try to rescue Terry and attack Vincent. But he's overpowered and defeated by Vincent. And I'm like, oh, right, okay, so now we're down to Bruce. Bruce is the hero. He's woken up.
I can't believe that like this guy is the film's hero.
I know!
I find it really hard to root for him, and I end up rooting for Vincent instead.
Me too! Like, I don't even root for Terry, because
No.
I'm like, I don't really care about you. You're in this predicament. And yeah, Bruce grabs a shotgun and he breaks his way into the shed, and him and Vincent have this confrontation. Now, I had this amazing moment while I was watching this movie. This is the first time I'd ever watched this movie. I'd wikied it, but seeing it is something else. And when Vincent appeared with a chainsaw and a pig mask, I immediately flashed to seeing him at the beginning of the movie sat in that little wooden chair, and I was like, yeah, movie, yeah.
Well, things certainly escalated. I mean, it's quite an iconic shot in all of horror movies.
Yeah.
I believe it was on the poster or the front cover of a Fangoria magazine. I think it's actually a very rare and expensive copy of that magazine publication now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the image of him with the chainsaw with the pig head on, it's like that's great. That's interesting. It makes you want to go, what the hell is this from?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this chainsaw duel, because obviously Bruce ends up picking up a chainsaw himself,
Yeah.
and they have a chainsaw fight. Now, it's they spent, I think, 5 12-hour days shooting this. It was the most extensive and grueling shoot of the entire production.
Yeah.
Because they really wanted this to work, even though this chainsaw duel wasn't even in the original script or the changed script. They literally had the idea when they were filming, and they went, "Wouldn't that be great to end the movie with?"
Yeah.
And so yeah, we have this extended chainsaw battle, which I'll be honest, I think it's a great highlight of the film. But the editing and the pacing and the shots for it doesn't really convey what's going on very well.
Well, that's it. I got no real risk from this situation. It was, like I said, for me, the movie had gone like this with comedy and horror so much that I saw this whole ending as a massive joke.
For sure, yeah.
Really, because like you said, Bruce the pre-rapist is the hero. Terry is tied to this conveyor belt and going towards this tiny bone saw, which I know bone saws are really quite strong, but she plays the damsel in distress so silly, and it only really gets activated because the two of the guys are swinging their friggin' chainsaws around all over the place. They accidentally activate it. And he jams the chainsaw into Vincent's side.
Yeah. It's really the only major gore shot of the entire film.
A really good one.
It is a really good one. And I think that was even censored on release in some countries as well, though. But I mean, this film does have an X rating. But, there's a couple of instances of brief nudity, but there's really no gore, which makes me think that the rating for this film is there because of how dark the subject matter is of cannibalism, really.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I mean, it is very prominent. I mean, they don't kind of shy away from it. And there's so many jokes when people are eating meat. The two little girls, when they found the meat packaging plant and they got scared, and they get in the car, and Rory Calhoun's like, "Don't worry, guys, I'll look after your girls." And he goes, "Wah!" And I'm like, how is that going to fucking help?
I'll calm them down for you.
Well, it worked.
I mean, they stopped crying, but
He scared them right back out of it.
traumatized for the rest of their life.
And so, to end this sequence, we get, of course, another joke.
Yeah.
Where he's just like, "I've got a confession to make before I die. I used preservatives."
I'm the biggest hypocrite of all. God forgive me. I'm like, that's what you've got? Okay, movie.
Like, Terry, you're not going to be upset? You've just lost, your next husband.
No. Terry's like,
She's like, "Oh, I'll leave with Bruce now."
yeah. And they when they walk out, they come across Ida's body. and Ida is buried upside down in the mud.
And she's still kicking.
Yes, yeah, I thought that. I was like, wow, she's still alive? You don't see what happens to the rest of the other people. Like, the police don't even turn up. The movie ends with Terry and Bruce standing out in front of the hotel, and Terry saying, "This place is evil." And then the sign explodes.
The end. It's like, okay, yeah, well, where do you go from there? Well, Ian, did you have any favourite or memorable scenes from the film?
I had a few, actually. I had a few. The garden sequences I thought were really well done. I mean, I love the idea of putting the bags over the head of the people, the slicing of the vocal cords so they can't scream, that constant gargling noise. I mean, there was one brilliant sequence I really specifically loved was when Ida went in there at night time. Now, I got confused at first why it was always being filmed at night, but I thought, well, that's the best time to take care of your garden, really, isn't it? When you don't want people to see, especially when you've got human bodies there. But it's the way she kind of skips through, whistling, and she's flicking on the lights, and then she's looking at all the bags, and she's happy. She's so mad and happy with it. It was just filmed really well. The look for a place to crash joke was so silly, and there were some other just lines that just came across as massive jokes, and certain situations that I just was like, that boggles my mind. Like, they're out at a picnic. It's Terry, Bruce, Ida, and Vincent. They're all happy. They're all eating meat. They're all talking, and they're talking about the auntie and the dog situation. And Terry mentions about the meat, and Ida goes, well, it's because he mixes the meat with, and Vincent just whacks her right in the gut.
It's like, yeah, it wasn't subtle at all, was it? And then Bruce is like, come with me, Terry. I'll just get you away from these two right now while they have a domestic.
Yeah. And that's what I thought. At that point, I thought they were husband and wife, but,
right.
Remembering they were brother and sister. The drive-in situation where he scares off all the kids. When they pulled up, I thought, oh, this is where they store all the cars, with all the people that they've killed over the years. And then when he hit the siren and he turned his lights on, shouted through the radio, all those people run around. You got the man and the woman running around naked.
Right.
Where were they? What were they doing? And
they weren't watching the film, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Well, I mean, they couldn't. I mean, he had to use binoculars to look at the screen, and then he had to get the audio through the radio, which was just brilliant. But then it led into the rapey sequence, which was a bit weird. The blonde with the whipping the room. Loved that sequence. Wasn't so much about her boyfriend coming out in whatever that getup is. I'm sure we've all been there. I'm sure we have. I really like the situation between Vincent and Terry in the bedroom. Like, she was really coming on to him, and he's kind of holding her back. And at that moment, I thought he was like in love with her. Because this scene between the actor and the actress was filmed so well. Like, I thought he was in love, and he was going to, want to, spend the rest of his life with her. But then the ending of the movie, when it leads into the chainsaw sequence and Bruce coming to rescue Terry, and Terry, even when Terry is given the information about the cannibalism and the meat and the people that she's been killed, she doesn't convey like she's really distressed. I reckon if 5 or 10 more minutes in that end sequence, she'd have been like, yeah, all right, Vincent. All right, I'll eat meat with you. Yeah.
Yeah, you pretty much mentioned all of my favourite scenes. I think if I had to pick a favourite scene, it would be the swinger lady with the whip. Just demolishing that hotel room. It's just like, what is this? But for me, I think it was most of the dialogue. I thought some of the jokes were I mean, some of them were really stupid.
Yes.
But they did bring a smile, and especially the we need to find somewhere to crash with the band. I really like the meat's meat and a man's got to eat.
Yeah.
The I used preservatives gag at the end was great. It takes all kinds of critters to make Farmer Vincent fritters. I like a great just play on words. It was just like some really good dialogue there.
Yeah.
I guess if I was going to pick a favourite image from the film, it's got to be Vincent with the pig head and the chainsaw and the lighting and the framing.
Yeah.
I was like, that's really iconic. That really works. So a good job there. Well, and do you recommend Motel Hell?
I do, but I only really recommend it as a 1980s classic horror movie. I wouldn't say it's great because, like I said, tonally the movie was kind of all over the place in places. Some of the jokes really, really worked and I laughed out loud, and some of them hit the floor and I was like, why did you do that for? And I was then thinking about that as I was going into the next sequence, which kind of made me feel the next sequence didn't work, and so on and so forth. As like I said, as a 1980s horror movie, I think it's an absolute classic, but you have to go in with that mentality.
Sure. Well, I kind of have to recommend Motel Hell.
Yeah.
Even though it's light on the on-screen horror and most of the dark humor is a little lacking, I still found it enjoyable and entertaining. The story of farmer cannibals was laughable, especially as we follow their process, and it was a good balance of tone considering how dark the subject matter was. The characters were really cartoonish, and the script very tongue-in-cheek. It felt like a bizarre reality where nobody behaved or reacted in a believable way. Roy Calhoun and Nancy Parsons worked great together though, and had real chemistry, and were fun to watch. I'd say the film was well paced, plenty of throwaway characters, memorable lines of dialogue, and a satisfying conclusion with a chainsaw duel. But as I said, it's not particularly gory at all, with only a few brief nude scenes, so it's almost surprising to see it was X-rated. I'd say give this one a watch, but don't take it seriously. It's played for laughs, and it's rather tame. And you'd not really be missing out on much if you skipped this one. And as I heard, checking in is easy, but checking out is hell. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.
I fear for you is just a game. I thought that I would always trust you. The love from you I'd always feel.
Edie, where's my jelly?